Come on. Hello everyone, it's Jamal Thomas. Welcome to the Progressive Soapbox. Good, much better signal. I accidentally was on the house Wi-Fi. This particular location, the Wi-Fi here sucks. The Wi-Fi sucks. But my wife had an awesome idea about bringing along a little device called this thing. Hoo-way! This thing has saved my ass for the entirety of the trip here, and saved hers because she needed to be able to also access work. I would suggest anyone who's getting one of those, power supply helps when you're doing something like live streaming because it's kind of intensive. All right, so take a look at this. I've covered this story for the last few days. And so I'm not sure how much time I'm going to spend on it, but I do want to go through it real quick. Take a look at this.
But just tell him,
But just tell him
you're okay. I hope you come back.
I hope you're okay. I hope you come back. But if not, then
Just thank you.
just thank you.
Thank you for everything you've done.
Thank you for everything you've done.
She knows. That's a woman that knows. Regardless of how much she hopes, she knows. Jamal Khashoggi is not coming back. Ultimately, the person who you just saw walking through that door was Jamal Khashoggi, and he was brutally tortured, murdered by this guy. Brutal thug. Solemn. Where is it? Here we are. Thought I had this as a separate thing. That's okay. All right, let's flip over. This is Mohammed bin Salem. Ultimately, he's a brutal thug. He would be the thug that's on the side of the street where you kind of cross to get out of the way. The only difference between the brutal thugs that you're accustomed to in America and this brutal thug is that this brutal thug has billions of dollars of oil money and get billions of dollars of weapons from the United States. So it can bully its neighbors, it can pacify its population with our help. It gives us oil, we give it protection. That's the racket. And it allows him to be the brutal thug that he is. Now, this brutal thug had been out there murdering Yemenis already. So it wasn't one of those things where we're shocked that he may kill somebody, but to do so in such a brazen way, it does still shock the conscience. I've done this story, like I said, a few days, but for all intents and purposes, just to give it a short summary, Jamal Khashoggi, permanent resident of the United States, works for the Washington Post, or at the time worked for the Washington Post. He was critical of the Saudis. Now, the catch is, he himself was a Saudi, but he had permanent legal residence in the United States. Jamal falls in love. Oh, so epic. And in falling in love with a Turkish woman, he needed to get proof that he was not married. So he goes to the Saudi consulate. The Saudi consulate says, come back in a week. He brings his girlfriend with him, who wants to be his wife. And she's standing outside as he goes into the consulate. And he vanishes. Vanishes. The Saudis would have made a better argument if they said he was abducted by aliens. But he didn't say he was abducted by aliens. They just said he vanished. We have no idea what happened to him. We're concerned for his safety. That's what they said. Turkey immediately says Saudis did it. A bunch of thick-necked guys got off the airplane, and a bunch of thick-necked brutes got back on an airplane. They essentially chopped his body up with a bone saw for purpose and spread it. Essentially took it out. Turkey was very specific. And it was specific within the course of a day or so, like almost immediately. Now, you can understand why. This is a Turkey consulate. It's in Istanbul. Regardless of it being Saudi territory, ultimately it is in Turkey. Turkey was greatly concerned about this, but Erdogan didn't necessarily want to push the issue, hoping that the United States would take the lead on pushing the issue if the information was out. That said, Erdogan had been talking and passing to anybody who would listen. They had him murdered. They had him murdered. New details emerged. The Washington Post is reporting that Turkey knew because Turkey had the consulate bugged. And not just had the consulate bugged, had it bugged in a way where there's audio and there's visual of Jamal Khashoggi being interrogated, beaten, and ultimately murdered. It's grisly. It's one thing for the guy to be a bloodthirsty killer in something else, abroad. It's another thing for him to kill somebody who was living in the United States or had permanent residence in the United States. And a Washington Post reporter at that. That woman that was crying, she worked with him. She cared about him. And sometimes with the story itself being so just explosive, like the hubris associated with just murdering a man. In an odd way, the murder of one man seems more important than the murder of several. With the idea of several, you can kind of let them blur. But with one man, it's very clear. A man walks into a consulate and that man doesn't walk out because a bunch of thick-necked Saudis murdered him and mangled his body, chopping him up, saying they chopped him up, but a bone saw for purpose. Putting the links below. I'm not going to go through the story in detail like I did before, but it's just an update. The reason Turkey knew is because Turkey essentially had the place bugged. There is one part I do want to show because it details the level of grisliness that we're referring to. Take a look at this. The recording showed a Saudi security team detained Khashoggi in the consulate after he walked in October 2nd to obtain an official document for his upcoming wedding, then killed him and dismembered his body, officials said. The audio recordings in particular provide some of the most persuasive and gruesome evidence that the Saudis are responsible for Khashoggi's death. They lied profusely about it. I don't know who they were lying to because I don't know who believed it. Maybe Donald Trump. The catch is Donald Trump already knew. It's most likely Donald Trump already knew. They probably, the United States had also intercepted communications hearing what Saudis were going to do, meaning they knew they were going to take him. Whether they knew they were going to murder him in this way, in this gruesome way, is unknown. But the United States intelligence services has come out, at very least given it to, to their minions, their stenographers, that we knew. We knew. They murdered a Washington Post reporter. And at the very least, we knew that this bloodthirsty regime who this guy had been criticizing were going to try to get their hands on him. We let him do it anyway. The voice recordings from inside the embassy lays out what happened to Jamal after he entered, said one person with knowledge of the recordings who, like others, spoke on condition of anonymity to discuss highly sensitive intelligence. You can hear his voice and the voices of men speaking in Arabic, this person said. You can hear how he was interrogated, tortured, and murdered. A second person briefed on a recording said men could be heard beating Khashoggi. The journalist has long-standing ties to the Saudi family, but has written critically of the current government and the Saudi crown prince, Mohammed bin Salman. He's crown prince. Yes, anybody can call themselves anything. I'm King Thomas. The only difference between the two of us is he has $1 billion. Anybody with $1 billion is a prince? I mean, can we stop with these fictitious labels? The other day, supposedly a prince and a princess got married. Why? Why would you allow a person to be above you in this way? Prince. It's princes. This is nonsense. It's a goddamn thug. The journalist had long-standing time right. The existence of such evidence would explain why Turkish officials were quick to accuse Saudi Arabia of killing Khashoggi. But Turkish officials are wary of releasing recordings, fearing they could divulge how the Turks spy foreign entities in their countries. Here's a news flash that I'm pretty sure every country knows. If you have a consulate in a country, that consulate is probably bugged. Full stop. Full stop. Why wouldn't a country... You have a consulate in Istanbul. It is within Turkey's best interest to understand what's taking place among its neighbors. One of those neighbors, again, a thuggish bunch of those neighbors, Saudi Arabia. Of course, they had the consulate bugged. Of course, they had the consulate bugged. I'll end it here. I'm not going to keep this one long. I don't even know if anyone is here for this one. But yeah, I'll end it here. Alright guys, if you enjoyed the content, please feel free to share, like, subscribe. And you can always support through Patreon. Thanks all.